sin is sin. My very first sermon that I ever preached, I'm not turned on, I don't think, yet, Timothy. Okay. The very first sermon that I've ever preached was to a mission in Fort Worth, Texas, back in the early 70s. And I'll never forget it. I'm just a young preacher boy going to seminary and thought I had the world by the tail, you know what I'm saying? Or actually didn't know that I would ever get out of that school. I preached a mission in Fort Worth, and my first sermon was Sin is Sin and the Wages of Sin is Death. Pretty easy sin, a pretty easy message. But it was, of course, all the people sitting there, they had to hear me before they got to eat. So I had a captive audience. But anyway, sin is there's no good time, and there's no good sin. What we have in our story here in Genesis 34 is a young girl named Dinah. Now, we are putting her age somewhere between 12 and 14 years of age. The Jewish Mizrach, which is kind of a commentary, has her age as low as 6 to 8 years old. I would rather think that she was in the ages of 12 to 14. It's when you begin to figure the ages of the young people at this time and today, well, we'll put down Genesis 34. 19 through 31 is going to be our text today. But when you look at just the ages of these kids, you had Leah and what do you have? Zilpah, Bilhah, and you had Rachel. Now, they didn't have the first child until 7 years after Jacob was in Pandamaran. And the first child was with Leah, and that was Reuben. And they were there for 20 years. So that's what Jacob says. These 20 years have I served thee. That's what he says. So if that's the case, then it was 13 years before they first started having children, right? So, and Leah was very, well, she had Simeon, and she had Levi, and then she had Judah. And then she left off, the Bible says she left off having children. Rachel couldn't have children, so Rachel gave, and Jacob spent his time with Rachel. This is the woman he loved. Once he was able to be with Rachel, he spent most of his time with Rachel. But Rachel couldn't bear children, and so she had him give with Bilhah, and Bilhah gave Dan and Naphtali. And then Leah gave him Zilpah. Jacob didn't know where he was going to, what home he was going to when he got off work. And she had Gad and Asher. Now, all of these children were had during this 13 years. And then Leah could bear again. And this actually happened when Reuben found some plant that was kind of an aphrodisiac. And Rachel said, I want it. Leah said, give me Jacob. And then she had Issachar. And then she had Zebulun. And then she had Dinah. Now, you can't read what I wrote because I'm not good at writing. I do scribbles. I'm good at scribbles. But anyway, these four and these two are the ones that's going to be involved today. So taking these ages, now they've been in the land for 10 years. So we add 10 years to that, that's 23. So Reuben would be, well, actually, you deduct the 9 months, and Reuben would be somewhere between 23 and 22 years of age. So these kids were still not very old, right? It's going to be important when we look at Simeon and Levi, who are somewhere in the age, I would think, somewhere between 21 and 22 years of age. What was the first sin in this chapter? Somebody tell me. Dinah, I think verse 1. Dinah skipped away to see the daughters of the land. All evidence is she did not tell Mama or Papa. She did not have a chaperone from all evidence that we have in our text. She decided to take off and go into town, and it was exciting. She's a young girl, and some of the old Jewish, Josephus and them, they talk about there must have been a festival at that time, and so she kind of snuck away to go to the party. I remember, I have down the back, my back, I have a scar that's, I don't know, about 5 inches long. And I was told there was some horses out on a field across from our farm that were just being walked in a circle. I was told, don't go. I went. And of course, a kid, bareback, and don't even know if I had shoes on at that time. I run underneath a barbed wire fence to run down there to see them. That was a mistake. And I paid for it. And one of the things, and really when we look at this is, I guess there's some things that, it was handled. My mother, of course, they didn't take me to a doctor to have stitches. At that time, you just fixed it, And when my father come home, that was a day and age when fathers handled the business. Mom used a switch often. Dad, the belt. And he didn't stop. But the purpose was to learn. Dinah took off to town, and that was a big mistake. But in her sin, and it's kind of like I think in the letter I wrote this week, the little devotion that I write, it's like my son was telling me about, he's a firefighter in Utah, telling me about a recent fire where a man was outside smoking, and he put out the cigarette, whether he rubbed it against the house or, I don't know, most smokers have no, they don't care where the cigarette is. I have some at the ranch still. I just leave them lay. I don't smoke, but some people that have been there did. And then he just tossed it and went to work. He come home, the house was gone. And so people would say, well, he needed to put that cigarette in water, or he needed to have an ashtray out there where he can put his cigarette out. To me, he shouldn't smoke. I mean, I'm not saying if you smoke that's a sin. You ought not to do it. But the point is, a little fire, a little thing, an insignificant little thing that perhaps has been done many, many, many times can turn into a major disaster. Chapter 34 is that. Dinah went to town, and she met the leader of the town's son. And he was probably a young man himself, probably a little older than her. He probably talked sweet nothing in her ear. But somewhere along the way, he raped her. And the words that are used in our text, it was not a comforting thing for her. He brutally raped her. And then, this is wonderful. Then after that, he says, I love her and I want her. Those words don't go together in my mind for someone that raped. I mean, I don't know how love and rape go together. I don't know how that works. What we have now in verse number 13 is we have the father and the son coming out to meet Jacob. Actually, right after verse 6, around verse 6. Matter of fact, verse 6 is the first time and the last time we hear about Jacob until the very end of this story. And as I was studying this morning, I wrote down some things. I said, where did Jacob go after verse 6? Where did he go after verse 6? What happened in verse 6 is Hamor and Shechem, the son that raped Dinah, and has not just raped her, but he has her in his house. He's not letting her go. They came to meet Jacob and tell them the story. Now the next sin is Jacob waits to talk to the sons. Why did Jacob wait to talk to the sons? What do you think a bunch of teenage and 20-year-old sons are going to say? And I'm not talking about a few. I'm talking about 10 or 11 at this time. What do you think they're going to say about someone raping their 12-year-old sister? They're not going to have wisdom, right? But who would have wisdom? And I thought this morning, where did Jacob go? Now, in chapter 28, we find Jacob going to Bethel, and he meets none other than the Lord Jesus Christ himself at the top of the ladder. And he makes a monument there, and he dedicates his life to Christ, to God. And from that point on, he's going to serve God. And then as he comes back from Pandamaran, we find out that in chapter 32 and verse number 10, he says, I'm not worthy. He begins to pray unto God, I'm not worthy of the least of thy mercies and grace. Thy grace and mercies. And then we find him in a few verses later wrestling with none other than Jesus Christ himself, the Son of God. 10 years later, this event has happened. Where's Jacob? Where did he go? Did he go out to pray? Did he seek God's wisdom? He turned it over to the children. And so we come here, verse number 19. What happened? Well, let's go to verse 13 and read on real quick, and I'll try to get through this quicker today. All right, verse number 13. And the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor, his father deceitfully, and said, because ye have defiled Dinah, their sister, and they said unto them, we cannot do this thing to give our sister to one that is uncircumcised, for that were a reproach unto us. But in this will we consent unto you, if ye will be as we be, that every male of you be circumcised. Then will we give our daughters unto you, and will take your daughters unto us, and we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. That doesn't sound like something that would be reasonable, but they have thought about it, and this is their plan. They're putting together a plan. And this plan, evidently Jacob don't know anything about it, but my question is why? Why don't he know about it? Why isn't Jacob handling his children's, handling this? He's the spiritual leader of the family. This could have all been avoided. Number one, it could have been avoided if Hamor, the father of Shechem, took care of business right away. Number two, Jacob could have taken care of this with Hamor right away. They could have found something that they could have done to that son and get the daughter back that would have satisfied them. I mean, the penalty for what he did in those days would have probably been death. But he didn't. He turned it over to Simeon and Levi and the sons, and Simeon and Levi began to set up and establish something for them to do. And he says, and this is all a big lie. This is all a big lie. And what's amazing in this, it went from Shechem and Hamor. Who committed this? Who committed the act? Shechem. Shechem committed the act. Who's responsible for that? Shechem. And his father has a responsibility for the children. Just like Jacob's going to have a responsibility for his children. So it could have been handled. It is not handled. Now what we have is a big deceit. And let's go to our text now and begin our lesson. And the young man deferred not to do this thing because he had delight in Jacob's daughter and was more honorable than all the house of his father. Now, when you first read this in the text, more honorable, well, it almost indicates he was an honorable man. No, that's not what this is saying. He was a wicked young man to rape a young girl. I don't care if it was his own, if it was a Canaanite girl. That's wicked. But more honorable means he was the son of the leader. He had honor in the fact that he was the son of the leader. Not that he was in himself honorable for anything that he had done, but he had married, he was rich. How about that? We'll just put it that way. He was wealthy. And deferred not means he rushed to make haste to get this thing handled. He wanted Dinah. But I think more than anything, when I consider these things, I think he wanted more than anything to get out of this. He knew he had done wrong. You can't rape a woman and not know you did wrong. I mean, there are some evil people that their brains are all mixed up. So I think he's in a hurry to get, not just to get her, but to get this over with. And then Hamor and Shechem, his son, verse number 20, came to the gate of the city and communed with the men of the city. I have been a salesman. If you're going to sell something, especially something that's pretty valuable, you've got to build value, right? And the first thing you do is tell how great the company you are that you're working. That's how. And so what does he do? He says, the men are peaceable with us. That's Jacob's sons. He's building value up. Yeah. In other words, these are great guys. Therefore, let them dwell in the land and trade therein. Now, let me ask you a question. They've been here for 8 years. Now, some believe they just got there. I believe they spent about 2 years in the area right after they crossed the river, and then they come back there and was about 8 years there. So what does that mean? They've already been there. They've already been trading. You understand what I'm saying? For the land, behold, is large enough for them. Jacob bought land there. Jacob owns land there. He will come back after. They will bring back after the Egyptian bondage. They will bring back Joseph and bury him there on the land that Jacob bought. So they've been there. Let us take their daughters to us for wives, and let us give them our daughters. Hey, that's a good deal. That makes sense. Okay, what's happened now is Shechem and Hamor has gathered as the men of the city. They always met at the gate. The gate is where people are coming through to town, and Shechem was in an area that was they would go through Shechem, and it was in between two mountains, and they would go through Shechem and either go to the north up the Mediterranean Sea or to the south from the Mediterranean Sea. It was a trade route. So people would come through there, and the city was built there, and they had a gate there, and at the gate of the city, men would come through. And then the people of the city, the men of the city, would meet there that's where they would have their meetings. That was their meeting place. And so the men of the city and the men around the city came to meet them there. And they're telling them, this is their sales pitch. Let's let our daughters be for them wives. You notice that the men are the ones that get to do what they want to do. The daughters, and they just become wives. It was a different time that they live in. And so it said in verse number 22, only herein will the men consent. Now they've got to sell this point. Only herein will the men consent unto us for to dwell with us, to be one people, if every male among us be circumcised, as they are circumcised. Guys, I don't know. That's a sales pitch there. You've gathered the men of the country and the men of the city and said, hey guys, if you want this, you got to do this. And oh, wait a minute. Let's rethink that. What is it they would say today? Let's pray about it. I'm going to go home and pray about this. Let me go tell my wife. That's a sales pitch. The reason what sold this was the intermarrying of the families. Jacob's family coming in was probably as big or larger than the city. Jacob had remember he was giving his brother hundreds of sheep and cattle and oxen, and camels and all kinds of things. He had gathered a large family and a lot of servants along the way. His household, he was prospering. Everything that he was doing was prospering. Now, these people are living in this area. Now, in order for them, and if you watch, which I've had the rare privilege of watching English movies in the 1700s. It's a great thing to do. Yeah, I can't even get a joke out of that. How did I not get a joke out of that? But the ladies in that time were always trying to marry rich. Let's go marry rich. And how you do that is you hook up with someone with money. And when you hooked up with someone with money, not only were you become rich, but your family was brought into the picture. These men were looking at the fact, okay, now let me see. If my daughter marries over into this, then I become a part of that family. Are you beginning to get the picture? How else do you sell this? This is not an easy sale, folks. I mean, this isn't they just walk down there, here's what you got. Oh, okay, we'll go do that. They have to present it in such a way that they're going to profit greatly because of it. Are you beginning to see the picture? And Hamor and Shechem, his son, hearkened to all that went out the gate of his city, and every male was circumcised. All that went out of the gate of his city. That, my friend, is a great sales pitch. And it came to pass on the third day, when they were sore, that two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi. Now these are, remember, these are Dinah's brothers that are just a couple years older than her. They are two of the older brothers of the first four. And they took each man his sword and came upon the city boldly and slew all the males. Do you understand that Jacob was a man of love? Look at all the kids and look at all the wives. He was a man of love. He was not a man of compassion. Where did these children learn to grab a sword and go kill somebody? What would they have ever done that? Maybe with a sword they may have killed a snake or something. But there's no record of them ever killing anybody, any fights going on. These were kids. These were 20-some-odd-year-old kids. And yet their anger, and this is what sin does sometimes. We see in our news every day, and it's so sad. So sad, these ladies that are daughters of and sisters of that are raped or brutally murdered. We watched over and over and over and over this woman getting hit in the face and knocked out on the street, and we see this and we see this. What do you think the family thinks about that? And 3 days, the rage has built up to such a point on these two young men. Reuben didn't go. Judah didn't go. But these two men went. And it has an everlasting penalty that followed them all the days of their life. Not just them, their families, unto this day. If I'm to tell you about Simeon, and I only have 5 minutes, but I'm going to tell you about Simeon. In chapter 49, Jacob tells Simeon that he will never be settled. Simeon, when they came back into the land, never really, each one, Judah was here, and Ephraim was here, Manasseh was here, and all of these, Naphtali was up here, and Asher was up here, and Gad and Manasseh and Reuben were over on the other side. But where was Simeon? Judah had to give them a piece of land in with them. And eventually Simeon was gone. They dissipated. Levi, what happened to Levi? Where's Levi's property? I don't see Levi's property anywhere. Where's Levi's property? Levi became the priest and was given no property. The people had to take care of them, their sin. And so they went in and killed all the males. They took their daughter back. The Mizrach tells us that Simeon took Dinah. Some say to be his wife. Some say she had a daughter because of this. But most just believe that she went with Simeon, he took care of her, and she just became a spinster that just spent the rest of her life with her. She came back, she went to Egypt, and they buried her. They brought her body back and buried her. Okay, they slew Shechem, Hamor and Shechem. And in verse 27, the sons of Jacob came upon the slain, spoiled the city. So now everybody's involved. All the rest of the children went in and just kind of ravaged the city, took the sheep and the women, everybody. And then Jacob in verse number 30 says to Simeon and Levi, ye have troubled me to make me to stink among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And I being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me and slay me. Oh, and I shall be destroyed, I and my house. I, me, my. What about Dinah? What about the men and the men that were slain and the women that were taken and the children that were taken? Some believe he sent them back. What about going to God first? And none of this could have happened. You see what I'm saying? Sin, if not taken care of quickly by the proper person, a godly person with the power of God in their lives that could get the wisdom of God, none of this whole chapter did not need to happen. But because of the sin of one young lady, opened the window of her house, snuck out at night, and went for a joyride with the other kids. That happens, right? That happens every weekend. In America, I will guarantee you, every weekend, a son or a daughter will slip out of a window at night. And we'll read about them sometimes. 5 teenagers killed in an automobile accident. Or some other terrible thing happens because of one little sin. There's no such thing as a little sin. Sin is sin. And the wages of sin, death. The penalty of sin is too grave for us to think of it as simple or minor. I wish we could have ended on a happier note. Hey, next week we go to Bethel. I love it. I love it. God says, Jacob, get back to Bethel. You need to get your life straightened back out. Head to Bethel. Father, thank you so much for the wonderful day. Thank you for this time we could spend together. Thank you for opening our hearts to what grave consequences that sin takes in our lives. Not just our lives, but many, many, many other lives and sometimes for generations. God bless our services this morning, Brother Matthew, as he preaches. In Jesus' precious name.